Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Friday morning. My name is Clayton Campbell. I'm the Director of Onsite Group, hosting your webinar today with speakers Jamal Sahib and Eddie Smit. This is a great opportunity from Sneeman de Jager as a give back to all the estate agents around the country. Today's topic of discussion is motivation and innovation. And we're just going to allow another 5 minutes for the stragglers who are still struggling to get onto the webinar to join us. We're up to about 100 people so far. We're just waiting for the last lot to come in. In the meantime, please do feel free to have a piece of paper ready, as well as a pen, jot down any learnings from today's session. Please also use the chat functionality, ask questions. You're welcome to pose questions during the sessions. We will field those questions and collect them and pose them to the presenters towards the end of the webinar. So we're just going to give another couple of minutes and we'll get going at 5 minutes past 10. Thanks so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar session this morning. Thank you for joining us. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you and welcome Jamal Sahib, entrepreneur and business coach, who will be taking us through the first 40 minutes of this presentation. The webinar today is brought to you by Sneeman de Jager, who have provided this webinar as a give back to the estate agents around the country. Following Jamal's discussion, we will introduce Eddie Smit, Director at Sneeman de Jager. There'll be an opportunity for questions after this session. So please do jot those questions down, send them to us using the webinar tool, and we will post those questions in a question and answer session towards the end. We look forward to the time with you this morning, and I'm going to hand over to Jamal. Jamal, over to you.
Good morning and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much, Clayton, for hosting this webinar in the back end. Without you, it wouldn't be possible. Welcome, everybody. Absolutely excited to have everybody on the line this morning. Thank you, Eddie, for pulling this or pulling on my shoulder to put this webinar together. I think it's an absolutely lovely gesture from you and the team at Snemandiaga to contribute to the economy and to society in whatever ways we can. I'm looking forward to spending the next 60 to 90 minutes with everybody on the line so that we can teach some of the things that we know, and we can also learn from each other, and we can learn through the questions that are posed at the latter end of this webinar. As an introduction, some of you have worked with me before, and if you've worked with me, you'd know that my background is that I am a process engineer, post an MBA, turned entrepreneur and business coach. My greatest passion is South Africa and job creation, and I look for any means and way possible to drive that process. As an entrepreneur, I get to create jobs directly. And as a business coach, I get to work with business owners and help them grow their businesses. And as their businesses grow, they manage to employ more people, which has a positive impact on South Africa as a country. It has an impact on reducing crime in the country. So the more people that have jobs, the less crime will be in this country in the future. And that is my driver. So that's me. I'm Jamal Sahib. I work with businesses in all different industries, and the driver being growing those businesses, growing the team, and creating jobs in a better South Africa for everybody that lives in it. So we'll start with a brief update on COVID. We are not medical experts, but I think we need to understand very briefly what's going on out there. As of yesterday, the stats were as follows. South Africa had 99 new cases overnight by yesterday. So we got up to 2,605 positive tests. We had 14 people that passed away between Wednesday and Thursday. So the total number of people that had passed away with COVID in South Africa by yesterday was 48. 903 people had recovered from COVID. And the reality is South Africa has done really well to flatten the curve, or the rate at which COVID has spread the last month and a half since the first infection reached South Africa, or the first test came back positive around the 5th of March. So South Africa is a third world country. I think our government has done really well, and they've managed to flatten the curve. There were really only two options. The one option was that we went into lockdown and we negatively impacted the economy, or the other option was that we did not go into lockdown. We lost tens of thousands of people's lives in a short period of time, and we would still have damaged the economy. So as a government, they've taken the right decision to lock the country down, and we need to find ways out of this. And this is where you and I come in. If we look at the global numbers briefly, we were more than 2.1 million cases globally for positive COVID tests. And remember, I mean, these are just tests that were concluded with positive results. There are many other people out there that have COVID that haven't even been tested. Up until yesterday, there were about 145,000 people that had died with COVID-19. America has 670,000 positive COVID cases with more than 35,000 deaths. Italy is about 160,000 positive COVID cases and 22,000 deaths. Now, you will see how where we don't take COVID as seriously as we should, what the impact can be in a country. So the reality is that we're not medical experts, and the medical experts and the scientists that are on the front line, we need to trust their judgment right now and do the best we can to reduce contact as far as possible so that we can flatten the curve and the rate at which COVID spreads. That being said, it is our responsibility as business owners, and I see every single person on this webinar as a business owner of some sort. So you are a business owner and or a leader in some sort of form. So either you are in a legal firm where you add value to the South African economy and to your home, or you are part of an asset agent company, either you own the firm or you are an agent or you are in the administration of that business. But either way, you play a role in helping that company through this tough time, helping that company survive for now and then grow into the future. So it is our responsibility as business leaders to grow this economy post-COVID. So the way I see the world is that it is the responsibility of government to create an environment where business leaders can grow an economy. Government cannot grow this economy. It is up to us to grow this economy post-COVID. So it is my job today to motivate the people that are on this webinar, to keep them in a state where we can continue to think positively, and we will post-COVID grow the businesses that provide the income that we need to run our homes and to run our country. We will also then look at some initiatives around innovation and how does innovation work. After which I will hand you over to Eddie, and he will speak about different ways for property financing during different times. So you'll see I don't refer to this as a difficult time. COVID-19 is not a difficult time, because if we label it as a difficult time, all we will see are the difficulties. I label this as a different time. It's a time that we haven't experienced in our lives before, and we need to find a way to work within this different time. And at the last part of this webinar, we'll field some questions from people that have typed in questions. And yeah, hopefully it'll put us all in a better space where we can grow this country. So let's kick off. You'll find that there are different zones in which we would have found ourselves during this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, initially, people were immediately plunged into what I call, or what this diagram calls, the fear zone. So I truly believe that we all entered the fear zone. Everybody started grabbing food and toilet paper and medication that they didn't need or they might need. They started to spread emotions of fear and anger, and all we shared was the negative posts on WhatsApp and Facebook, and we complained frequently, and we were spying on our neighbors that were stretching in their front gardens if they had passed the boundary wall. We forwarded all the messages that we received. We were getting grumpy and angry easily, and that's because we were stuck in what we call the fear zone. So being positive by nature, you know, I'm generally an optimist. I tried to, as quickly as possible for myself, shorten that zone, make it as small as possible so that I could get out of that zone into a learning zone. So being consciously aware, I pulled myself into a learning zone where I became more aware of my emotions, and I started to look at what was happening elsewhere in the world, where countries were a few weeks ahead of us with the pandemic and on the curve. And as I did that, I quickly put together information, and I set up a webinar about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks ago now. And my intent for that webinar was to pull people out of the fear zone into the learning zone. And we had close to 400 people on that webinar that dialed in, and we shared our learnings at the time, and we helped people to unpack where we were as a country, as an economy, and as humans. I then moved into the growth zone, and I'm in the process of pulling people with me into this growth zone. So that's what today is really about. We're pulling people out of the fear zone into the learning zone, and some people that are already in the learning zone, we're pulling out of the learning zone now into the growth zone. And where do we want to be right now? So we've got 2 weeks of extended lockdown. And in this time, we should be in a space where we are thinking of others and looking at ways on how we can help them. Yes, right now, most of us are in tough situations, but as we start to look at other people around us and find ways to help them, that abundance mindset will come back to help us as well. So we need to look at our talents, and what are some of those talents that we can use right now to positively influence the world around us? What are those talents that we can use to share with our families, with the people that we work with? How do we live in the present and not focus on the past or the future right now? So how do we live in the present and have a plan for the future? So we need to live in the present, and in the present, that includes planning. How can we be empathetic with ourselves and the people around us? So how can we really feel how people around us are feeling right now? So that is being in the growth zone, unpacking more calmly what is going on, what is actually going on around us, and how we can use that to get out of this scenario better than we got in. So yes, it is easier said than done. So as I move through slides going forward, I will work with you through a simple recipe on some of the things that we can do to actually achieve that. So as a coach, I do different things. And one of the things that I do is I stand on the balcony and I look out at the kingdom that's in front of us. And when we do that, we look at what I call the foundation to coaching. And this is one of the slides that makes up the foundation for coaching for me. So some of you would have seen this slide before if you've dialed into any one of my webinars before. But if you haven't, or if you have, let's go through the slide again. Now, I truly believe that there are two types of people in the world. There are those people that live their lives above the blue line, and there are people that live their lives below the line. People that live their lives above the line, they take ownership, accountability, and responsibility for anything and everything in their worlds. Those people you will find are powerful people and they are successful people. They are people that energize other people and teams around them. So right now, let's take COVID-19 as an example. Yeah, we can turn around and we can point at China, and we can point at the government for shutting the economy down. That would typically be behaviors that are below the line, where we blame China and we blame the government. We make excuses for why we feel powerless and why we are in the situation that we are. And we live in denial, where we tell ourselves these lies for so long that we actually start to believe them. Or alternatively, we can stay above the line and take ownership for our own lives. We take ownership for our own businesses. We understand that the situation is what it is. And only by taking ownership for what the situation is, can we get out of it better than how we got into it. So for now, the conversation is survival. As business owners and as business leaders, we need to, for the next 3 months, stop thinking profit and just think survival. So step one becomes, how do we keep this business alive? And then step two becomes, how do we then grow this business beyond COVID-19? But we need to take that ownership and accountability. We also need to take ownership and accountability for the people around us. If we have families, we need to make sure that the people around us feel safe, because our kids are also feeling the fear of COVID-19. They are also unsure of what's going on. And it is our responsibility. We are accountable for how they will feel 20 years from today when they stop to think about the time of COVID-19. They will remember how safe we made them feel, even though we were in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of chaos. So right now, my request to every single person in this room is to write down the acronym OAR. We need to have an oar and row our way out of this. We need to take ownership, we need to take accountability, and we need to take responsibility. And together, we will come out stronger, more powerful, and more successful on the other end of COVID-19. The second foundational slide that I would like to talk about this morning before we get going into a recipe on how to stay motivated and what are some of the things that we can actually do. The second thing is we need to understand that every single one of us is learning every day. So if you were a know-it-all, guess what? I think even you would be surprised when the COVID pandemic hit the world. So consciously, we need to remind ourselves that we need to learn something new every day. We consciously need to remind ourselves not to respond by saying, yeah, I know. Because the moment we respond and become know-it-alls, we stop learning. And if we are going to get the maximum out of life, we need to be willing to learn and grow every single day. So today is about learning. Today is about learning for every single person on this webinar, including Eddie and myself. So I will be learning through this conversation. Eddie will be learning through this conversation. And all of you on this webinar will be learning out of this conversation if we keep an open mind and we look to get the maximum out of this. So what I have are and conversations. I do not believe in having or conversations. I don't think there's such a thing as work or life, or work or fun. Work-life balance, as far as I'm concerned, is junk. I don't believe that there exists a thing called work-life balance, because work is a component of life. So if you can picture this, life is a big circle, and in this big circle of life lay various components. One of them is work, another is family, another is community, another is self. And there are different components that make up life. So we need to stop trying to have a work-life balance, and we need to understand that work is a component of life. We need to be having and conversations. We need to have good work and good family lives. We need to have fun. So it can be work and family and fun. So it does not need to be work or family. It can be work and family. Similarly, you can have a fantastic career and have a fantastic social life. We don't need to have one of the two. We can have and conversations. We can be safe and we can remain healthy and we can find ways to keep this economy going, which is why we are on this call today. We are looking at ways on keeping our businesses alive right now and growing our businesses into the future post the lockdown. Post the lockdown is not post-COVID. COVID's going to be around with us for a long time. So we need to find ways to stay safe. We need to find ways to stay healthy whilst staying safe. And we need to find ways to keep the economy and our businesses going. So we are going to have and conversations. My team members will tell you that if they tell me, Jamal, do you want this or do you want that? I go, how can we have this and that? So where is that space where we can find win-win? And then finally, as we go through the rest of this recipe and this presentation, adults learn through what I call light bulb moments. So we'll have half an hour of content, and in that half an hour of content, you might have 3 or 4 moments where a light bulb goes on. You go, why didn't I think of that? Or why didn't I see it that way? Oh, that's a great idea. Let me write it down. So adults learn through light bulb moments. And when you have a light bulb moment, please write it down, because you should have 3, 4, 5 light bulb moments during the session. And those are going to be your key learnings that help stretch your mind and the way you think. So in this session, over the next hour or so, please chase light bulb moments. Look for those moments that are aha moments for you and write them down so that you can action them. Perfect. So now as we move into the motivation so that we can succeed, I did a lot of research on ways, or I looked at what methodology could I use to motivate this team of people that were in the property industry at the moment. And through my research, I decided that the model that I would use for today would be the model used or written by Stephen Covey, called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So in order to be motivated, it means that we would like to remain being highly effective people. That's what we'd like. So the end in mind, if you've read my book is called Start with the End in Mind. The end in mind for me for this discussion is that we leave this as highly effective people. So the model that I've chosen to use today is that we will go through Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So if you've read the book, humans, we tend to forget. So we'll go through each of the steps and I'll give you my interpretation of each habit. And that then becomes some of the tools that we will use to remain motivated right now and to plan our way out of this current scenario or lockdown. So Stephen Covey speaks of 7 habits. And the first habit that he speaks of is being proactive. So habit 1, if you would like to be an effective person right now and you would like to remain motivated, is that you need to be proactive. So we know that the lockdown will end in 2 weeks from now. So what does that mean in the meantime? How do you remain proactive? How do you stay in good health? How do you stay fit? How do you right now manage to continuously market your business without becoming annoying? Because right now, you need to market your business and stay front of mind, but you also need to be cognizant of the fact that people are in a different space of mind. So your marketing material and your adverts need to be different. They need to be tailored differently for the current environment. So how can you be proactive now and start planning to be responsible with your methods of marketing? How can you increase your circle of influence right now? So being proactive, Eddie and I have decided, let's pull people together right now and work with them now so that into the future, we've built a strong community, a community of people that we've worked together with, and we've learned similar things on how to be effective so that post-COVID, we will work better together because we've built this relationship during a tough time. So habit one, how do you be proactive in everything that you do right now? Reactive is something happens and then we do something about it. Proactive is anticipating what's coming and planning for it so that when it does happen, you have the best possible solution for it. Habit two, how do we implement the second habit from Stephen Covey called begin with the end in mind? So we need to understand that there are two steps to this. Right now, if you are an agent, you need to ask yourself, what are my targets as an agent for the next 5 years? How much of money would I like to make in commission? Let's use an example. Let's say there's an agent on the line that wants to make 5 million Rand in commission over the next 5 years. So proactively, this agent starts with the end in mind and says, over the next 5 years, I want to make 5 million Rand in commission. So they create this process in their minds that says, okay, it's 5 million over the next 5 years. How do I then break this down per year? So in 2020, how much of that 5 million would be possible? And then in 2021, what would possibly be achievable? And what would 2022 then look like? And then apply ratios of percentage growth, understanding what the economy looks like, understanding what the interest rate looks like right now, because I mean, that's really a positive that you can use to try and help you sell property. The fact that the interest rate is down 2% in the space of a month. So you start to create this mental process with your end in mind for the next 5 years. And then you start what we call a physical creation. You write down this plan, write it down, build an Excel spreadsheet per year, understand per year what is the commission structure that, or the commission income that you will be making. The next step then becomes, so how will you do that? What will be your marketing mechanisms? How much of money would you need to spend on marketing? How much of time are you prepared to put into marketing your properties and building relationships? What are the networks that you are going to join? How will you become part of certain social circles where there are people in their social circle that buy property or sell property? So you will start that physical creation through that process. So you need to start with the end in mind. So step one, be proactive. Step two, when you are being proactive, start with your end in mind. Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? Create it mentally and then create it physically. Write it down and start to build that process. Step three, habit three, put first things first. What does this really mean? It actually means we need to prioritize correctly. So being at home right now, for many of us, does not mean that we are doing nothing. In fact, I feel like I do more work now that I'm in lockdown than I did prior to lockdown. However, human nature is such that we tend to, more often than not, we tend to procrastinate. So we leave important things for later in the day, and then we're tired and we don't get it done accurately, and it takes us longer to get it done because we've procrastinated. Stephen Covey says you should put first things first. That means you need to prioritize in order of importance what needs to be done, and you need to do the more important things earlier in the day when you are more fresh. So there's a brilliant book called Eat That Frog. Eat That Frog. If you have access to Amazon or Audible, you can actually buy the book called Eat That Frog and read it. And Eat That Frog talks about how do you prioritize by doing the more difficult tasks early in the day. So eat the frog in the morning, and then the rest of your day is easier because then you get to eat ice cream and the nicer stuff. So right now, we need to get into the habit of prioritizing. Yes, sometimes we convince ourselves that, the right thing to do in the morning would be to bake a cake, perhaps. When in actual fact, the more important thing to do in the morning is get your marketing done for the day for your business and build your strategic plan for the next 3 months and the next 5 years. And later in the afternoon, perhaps you can bake a chocolate cake. But we need to prioritize those. And the right habit is for you to sit this afternoon and write down the 5 or 7 or 10 things that you need to do tomorrow, and then rank them. So if you've got 5 things on the list to do, you need to ask yourself, okay, which one's most important and would add greatest value right now? And you prioritize that one as number 1. And then you ask yourself, okay, so which one's least critical right now that I can do later in the day? And you prioritize that one as 5. And then you prioritize the stuff between 1 and 5, and you would execute it tomorrow based on a plan. So put your higher priorities first and plan effectively the day before. And that's habit 3. Habit 4, think win-win. So I always believe in win-win. I look for win-win in every situation possible. Now, there's another word for this. I call it expert negotiation. When you're negotiating, you need to be thinking win-win. So I run a course called Expert Negotiator, and in that process, I teach people that the best negotiation is a negotiation that ends at the exact point where both people are happy, right? So as we go through our days, we negotiate 5, 10, 50, sometimes 100 times. Almost everything in your day ends up being a negotiation. So let's use some examples. So one of your kids perhaps wants a chocolate cake. So that becomes a negotiation. The kid needs to negotiate with you for chocolate cake. And you need to find a way for win-win where the kid gets to be happy, but at the same time, you consciously aware of the health impact and the time requirement from you on delivering that chocolate cake. So how do you find a space for win-win? Similarly, if you are an employee and you need time off, when you ask your boss for time off, it's a negotiation. If you are a boss and an employee is looking for time off, that also becomes a negotiation. You're just on the other side of the negotiation. So often in the day, often in a week, we go through a lot of scenarios where we need to negotiate. And if you are going to be a highly effective person, as you enter negotiation, you need to find the space for that negotiation where it will be a win-win. So when you're thinking of your marketing initiatives, your strategies for the next couple of weeks and a few months, think win-win. What is that scenario where you will be able to deliver value for your client right now that will allow you to keep your business alive, but will also give the client benefit right now in that the client will get also good value for money. Another example right now that many of us are going through is landlord in commercial spaces with their tenants, or tenants in commercial spaces with their landlords. So myself, I end up being on both sides of that negotiation because in some scenarios, I am a tenant, and in other scenarios, I am a landlord. Now, the reality is some landlords are really playing hardball and they're insisting on full rent during lockdown. But if we look at it and we step back to unpack, and if we start to think win-win, a tenant in a commercial property is in the game of earning revenue through trading either a product or service. Now, a forced lockdown is imposed on a tenant, and the tenant then cannot generate the revenue that they need to generate through trading either the product or service. A landlord is in the business of receiving rental. That is their method of revenue generation. So if a tenant's revenue is being impacted by a lockdown, then common sense would tell us that a landlord's revenue should be impacted because of the lockdown, because they need to find a win-win space and share this burden. It cannot be carried by the tenant alone. It needs to be a shared scenario. Now, if the tenant and the landlord are thinking win-win, they will reach a compromise right now that will allow both of them to stay in business right now and into the future. But if a tenant is only thinking about a win on their side and is trying to have 100% of the rent waived, that means they're transferring the loss completely to the landlord. And I think that's, in all honesty, that's not win-win, and therefore that's not fair. Because the landlord still has costs associated with maintaining that building. So things like rates and utilities at minimum, right? Conversely, if a landlord's thinking, no, the tenant needs to pay full rent right now, then the landlord's not thinking win-win. The tenant's going to lose. And in the short to medium term, that tenant's probably going to be out of business. So if the landlord and tenant are both thinking win-win, right now, we need to find the space through relationship and conversation, which is often quite important in negotiation, integrity, abundance mentality. When we start to think and operate in that space, we'll find a scenario where both people will survive this difficult time. Yes, difficult, but different time. And into the future, the win-win right now will help them grow post the impact of lockdown and post COVID-19. So think win-win. Habit number 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So humans are quite interesting, but more often than not, we listen to respond or to reply to somebody rather than listening to try to understand what the person may be telling us or the situation may be telling us. Now, it is critically important that we need to be consciously aware that when somebody is speaking to us or communicating with us, we need to listen first to understand before we formulate a response. And then when we respond in a method that is then easier for us to become understood. So communication really has 2 parts. There's the part where you articulate your point, and then there's the part where somebody has to understand and decipher what the message is in the first place. So habit 5 for effective people, you will find that good business leaders listen. You will find that good business leaders often ask questions for clarity, but they ask good questions. They ask clever questions which drive a conversation deeper so that they get a deeper understanding before they take a decision. So you will find sometimes that maybe you think your boss asks a lot of questions, but the reality is if they're asking good questions, it's so that they can get a better, deeper understanding of the situation before they can take an informed decision. So you as a business leader right now, every single person on this call, and we had more than 200 registrations for this webinar, so we're pretty close to 200 on the call today. You need to seek first to understand. Humans have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and therefore we need to listen double as much as we speak. It's a little bit difficult when you're running a webinar. I'm probably speaking 10 times more than I'm listening right now. But I will give Eddie his turn and I will give the audience some time to ask questions, and then I'll listen more than I speak. So habit number 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Habit number 6, synergy. You need to be synergizing now more than ever before. There's the old adage that says 2 heads are better than 1, because when 2 people talk to each other, they have light bulb moments, and through this process they spark bigger ideas. That's actually what a coaching relationship is. When a business owner sits with a business coach, the coach asks questions that drive deeper understanding, and the result is light bulb moments for both the coach and the client. And that's a process that's used to grow businesses. Because a business owner, whether you are an agent running your own little business within an estate agent franchise, or whether you are the franchisor or the business owner in the franchise, either way, you need to grow that business. And a business owner is generally very lonely because they have nobody to speak to. But in a coaching relationship, as you speak to a coach and you unpack different scenarios and you ask advice or you ask questions, and the coach looks at it from different angles because they don't have the same view that you have because they're not in your business daily. They ask questions that trigger different ways of thinking. So that synergy between two people is what you should be looking for right now. Now, I do something called leadership through storytelling. So I would like to tell a story about synergy. And an example of synergy in my world right now was that a few days into lockdown, so after the government had announced lockdown, and we were, in fact, the day after the lockdown announcement, I called my family together. So I called my wife, Sarge, and the two kids. MH is 10 years old and Uthman 6. So the four of us had a formal meeting where we sat down and I got the team to understand that right now we need to team up and work differently. So we need to support each other, because being at home now doesn't necessarily mean dad's around to play. Being at home now might mean that dad's at home because he's in lockdown, but there are times of the day where dad will need to work. And as a team, I will need them to support that and understand that, not be disappointed or upset with me at the time. So if you've seen our vehicles driving around, and if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you'll see that I came up with a little logo for our family, and we call it Team Sahib. So we've used the S of Superman in Sahib. And that is actually to build synergy for us as a team. Now, I often remind our kids that Superman borrowed that S from us, because it's actually the Team Sahib S that Superman borrowed. But it's a little game that we play, and it's a way for us to build a synergy between us so that as a team, we achieve a better outcome. So what are you doing to drive synergy in the world around you? Do you have a little team that supports you in your home? And if you are single and you don't have a team at home, what about in your business? What about in your social network? We should be creating synergistic teams that work together for a greater good, for a common goal, for an end in mind. So synergy is habit 6 of highly effective people. So the saying goes, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So if you take a shipping container and you fill it with Lamborghini parts, they are just Lamborghini parts. But when you put those parts together and build the Lamborghini is way greater than the sum of its parts in a box. So similarly, in your space around you, build those synergistic teams. If you're an agent, with your principal, build a synergistic team. With your marketing BDM, build a synergistic team. With your admin team members, build a synergistic team. Because through synergy, you can achieve way more than you can achieve on your own. Think win-win and synergize. And then step 7. Step 7 is called sharpening your saw. So the 7th habit of highly effective people is that you need to sharpen your saw. So there's that old adage that goes, if I had 4 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend 3 hours sharpening my saw. So as a human being, as a business leader in your own right, as a leader in your home, as a leader in your family, as a leader in your community, how are you sharpening your saw? Sharpening your saw means you are spending time learning, you're spending time growing mentally, you are spending time on your mental health, you're spending time on your physical health. Those are the things that you need to be doing to sharpen your saw. So yeah, there's a lot of people out there now on Facebook and on Insta telling you about how this is the best possible time to wind down and think about life and think about the world. It's easier said than done, because for many of us right now, we're thinking about how do we keep our businesses alive now? How do we make sure that we have enough money to pay our suppliers, the people that work for us, our team members? How do we support our communities? How do we keep the people around us going? So it's not perhaps the ideal time to be sharpening your saw, but there are components of sharpening your saw that can happen now. You can spend time learning and growing. You can spend time with your family. I mean, when you're having a meal, how do you make that meal fun? A simple thing like a DIY burger, light a braai stand, put some patties out if you can, get everybody to braai their own patties, do a DIY burger, laugh at it, have some fun, sharpen your saw, get some downtime, teach people around you different skills where possible. But that's not really what I'm talking about when it comes to sharpening your saw. It's a bit of it. Every year, I do sharpening the saw twice a year. So the last time I did this was my mentor and I in September, October last year. We flew to Cape Town for 3 days. We booked into a hotel, a really nice hotel. And for 3 days, we ate good food, We had good conversation. We read good books. We did good training routines. So we went for a run on the beach. We take 3 days twice a year, and we just spend some time sharpening our saws. My next intervention for sharpening my saw was actually booked for March this year, and it was obviously cancelled because of the lockdown. But I will replan into my diary time for later this year where I will sharpen my saw. And what I'm saying is that every single person on this call should be taking 2 days twice a year to sharpen your saw. Get together with 1 or 2 other people that you enjoy spending time with. Go away, get some rest, read some good books, eat some good food. Plan your next 6 months during that time, but not like physical planning. Start coming up with ideas of what you think the next 6 months could look like based on the 6 months that had passed. That's a critical thing to be able to do, is sharpen your sword. So spend time on your social and emotional well-being, spend time on your mental well-being, your spiritual well-being, and your physical well-being. So that being said, I think we're at the back end of my 45 minutes. I would like to wrap up at this point and get ready to hand over to Eddie. That being said, now is really a good time to innovate. And for the innovation part of this session, I'd like to show you what research says why people don't innovate. So when we understand why people don't innovate, you will see that none of the reasons as to why people don't innovate are not relevant right now, which means right now we have all the reasons needed to innovate. And then I will hand over to Eddie, who will take us through his thinking around different ways to finance property transactions right now. So let's look at research and what it says as to why people do not innovate. People usually do not innovate because they say they don't have the time or the money to waste on unproven ideas. Now that's not relevant right now because we have the time to innovate because our usual way of business in most scenarios is non-existent. So right now, previously I would have done a seminar and had 40 people in the room and done a motivational session around business, and that's how I would usually do things. Right now, I have been forced to innovate because I have the time to innovate. And we're doing a webinar that is reaching now 200 people in that industry versus where we would have reached 40 in a seminar a couple of weeks ago. The second reason why people don't innovate is they often say, we did an innovation workshop once and nothing happened. Okay, forget about that. You did an innovation workshop, it didn't happen, but the world has changed. So it's now time to start innovating without an innovation workshop. Be innovative about that as well. So the third reason why people don't innovate is they say, why risk it when we are doing fine? You'll find that most businesses right now are not doing fine. So this is not applicable. Therefore, we need to find ways to innovate. The other reason that people previously didn't innovate is they would say, I can't innovate with those marketing bohemians in the room. There is no room. There is no box. You can innovate. The world is a different place right now than it was a month ago, 3 months ago. What's the point? Our CEO will just do what he wants anyway. That's another reason people didn't innovate previously. I can tell you right now that I work with many CEOs of companies of different sizes. So from companies that do 3 million per annum to large independent single-owned businesses that do close to R1 billion revenue per annum. And even those CEOs are afraid right now. So even they are listening to different ideas. So if you have something innovative in your mind, now is the time to try and implement it. Sure, I want to, but my job performance is based on current norms and operations. That was a previous answer given by people. Now your job performance is not based on current norms and operations. So you have the opportunity to innovate. And then finally, some people would say, my manager says she wants it, but her response to my ideas is always, yeah, but. I think there's way less of that now. The fact that we're doing business completely differently, people that previously never bought stuff online are buying things online right now. So for example, we run an online LPG gas business. And we have way more new customers in the last month that have been trying to buy gas online than we've had in 3 months before that. And the simple reason is that people they don't have another choice. They need to step out of their comfort zones. If you want to buy LPG gas, the only way you can buy LPG gas from us right now is if you log into our website and you buy gas. Previously, you had the option of coming into a store, swiping your card, and we'd deliver the gas the next day. Some people felt more comfortable with that. Right now, they are going the extra mile and they're doing stuff out of their comfort zones. And luckily, we've innovated to give us the opportunity to sell gas online, and people are stepping out of their comfort zones. What are those things that you can do right now to be innovative in your business and in your world that will allow you to do transactions that will keep your business alive now, and your business can then grow and thrive into the future? So as a final word, it is those people that remain positive right now that will keep their businesses alive during this time. And it is those people that will come out on top on the other side and will be the business leaders and business greats of the future. So if you only have two choices. The one is you can live below the line, you can blame, make excuses, and live in denial. But whilst you are doing that, there are people that are living their lives above the line, and they're taking ownership, accountability, and responsibility for themselves, for their lives, for their businesses, and for the people around them. Those people are going to stay motivated. They will implement the 7 habits, and in fact, they will write them down and remember them and rehearse them and action them daily. And they will be the people that will be innovative, and they will find a way to survive through this. So I wish every single one of you all of the best. I hope that you will action this advice and these guidelines, and you will use this to stay positive and motivated during this time. You will innovate your way out of this. And I now hand you over to Eddie. So I'll hand you over to Clayton, who will then pass you over to Eddie. Clayton, over to you.
Thank you, Jamal. Thanks, Jamal, and thanks for those informative tips. I see in the comments here and in the questions, people are streaming in saying, thanks so much, Jamal. So thank you for that. Please do remember that you are able to ask us questions during the time. Please do put them in the message box so that we can get those questions over to our panelists at the end of Eddie's discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to allow Eddie to get his presentation up on the screen. There we go. And we will get. Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me the opportunity to introduce to you Eddie Smit, Director at Snyman de Jager. Eddie, thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Clayton. It's a privilege to speak to all the people out there this morning. Jamal, thank you for your insights. I really had some food for thought, and yeah, I'll think over what you talked about. Just a bit about myself. I've been in the business for 25 years dealing with property law, and I'm excited to deal with you this morning some ideas and insights that we've built up over the years. This is just a brief overview. We've only have about 15 to 20 minutes of some aspects, and the intention is not to go into the deep legal consequences thereof, but just to give you some ideas. And then obviously our team at Snyman de Jager are ready and working from the houses, so you are welcome to contact myself or Johan Miller, my co-director, or Roman Schultz, to discuss some of these things and to help you implement it from there. So if we talk about different way to finance properties, we must always start at mortgage bonds. That's the first choice and the cleanest transaction available. And as you would know, interest rates was cut recently by 2%, bringing it down to historical lows of up to 7.75%. Now, I have a chart with me here showing the interest rates over the years starting in December 1962. And interesting enough, it was 5.5% in December 1962, and then around about July 1973, it was 7.5%, more or less where we are now. I don't have to tell you, but in the meantime, it peaked at 25.5% in 1998. So the fact is, interest rates are very, very low at this stage, and I think this makes property affordable in a market like where we are now. So I'm convinced that this is the perfect opportunity for first-time home buyers to get into the market with a very low interest rate, and that good properties would become available at very good prices. There are talks about panic selling. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing, and I think agents should advise their clients properly about property values, all the things that you do, and now it's more important than ever. But there will be some panic selling, and there will be good opportunities for investors and first-time home buyers. What I also know is that there's a number of new participants, call it banks and financial institutions in the markets, in the loan space market, in the home loan space market. I can't disclose too much about that, but there's some new entrants also coming in. With the old banks that we know and that's been over the time with us. So I can tell you that bond originators and banks are looking for new and solid business, and this is a time that you can give that extra service to your client and get them to do a pre-qualification. They're interested in property. They obviously can't see the property right now, except on your nice websites and all the photos that you have available. But this is now a time to pre-qualify your purchases, to get them to know what they can buy for, and when the lockdown is over, they'll be able to proceed quickly and see the right kind of stock and not waste too much time. Then some creative ideas when it comes to financing of a property. It's always good to speak to your banker or to a bond originator with proper knowledge and experience. There's ways to be creative when applying. When the bank, for instance, only approves a loan of 80 or 90% of value, then try to refinance a second property, or then look for ways to release the deposit required. It might be that there's some inheritances coming, or you know, for deposit funds in the bank, or look for creative ways. If affordability is not enough, look at ways to involve a spouse or a close family member in the application, but be sure to get a proper agreement drafted. There's always legal implications here. There might be, you know, an uncertainty for future relationships change. People want their money back. So it's incredibly important that if you go this route, to speak to us and get us drafted, even if it's just a 2-pager, but a simple agreement, just to make sure that relationship in the future is well regulated. And then, as I said, the low interest rate and good properties coming in the market. It's now time for buy-to-let properties that might become available again. It's a good time to build up a database of prospective investors. So while you're sitting at home, think of those people that you think might be interested in buying good properties at good prices for the rental returns after we all finish this lockdown, so you can spend your time well. Okay, then the next point is, sorry, just give me a moment here. Yeah, then I want to speak to you about the FLISP government subsidy. I'm not sure if all agents are aware of this, and this is probably pitched to the lower end of the market. But due to the interest rates coming down, it becomes more available in terms of the amount that you can apply for. So a first-time buyer can qualify for a FLISP government subsidy, and they can qualify for a bigger home loan now of up to 870,000 Rand. And I think after the latest interest rate cut, it might even be more. I just couldn't get the correct information before today's webinar. So there's some requirements to qualify for the subsidy, and it must be a first-time home buyer, a South African citizen, and then the gross household income must not be more than 22,000 Rand. He must be a dependent, and then quite important is you must have an approved home loan already. So first step is to apply for a home loan. And once you have an approved home loan, then the buyer must apply for the government subsidy in this way. I know, and I've spoken to a few bond originators, that they will help you to apply for this government subsidy, or then your banker might be able to help you. Then this morning, I want to speak about an old favorite, something that we know for a long time and that we've used over the past number of years quite a bit, is an agreement for installment sale of a property. So this is applicable to residential properties, and it regulates installment sale agreements. And the property must be sold to the purchaser in 2 or more installments over a period exceeding 1 year. So that's the technical requirements for an agreement of such a sort. The process is well regulated. The Alienation of Lands Act, the Conventional Penalties Act, and the National Credit Act are all applicable here, and it makes it an alternative of a strong framework. So it's a safe and reliable way to finance property. The seller must record the installment sale agreement in terms of Section 20 of the Act against the title deed of the property. So there's no transfer taking place initially. The property stays in the name of the seller, and then the installment sale agreement is recorded in the deeds office against the title, and the seller may not transfer or sell this property to anybody else. You will obviously now start receiving the installments over a period. An important court case that was recently decided, the Amardine and Avis versus Registrar of Deeds. An important point was pointed out by the court to say that installments are only due and payable from the date of registration of the installment sale agreement. So it's important to get that installment sale agreement properly registered. And as I said, it protects the purchaser because the seller cannot alienate the property to a third person. Now the question is, when would I use it? And I think this is where it gets a bit difficult, and we must be very clear about it. So sometimes the parties may find themselves in a situation where they are just not able to obtain bank finance for whatever reason. And then more to that is the seller obviously would not need the full proceeds of the purchase of the sale to purchase a new property. And then the purchaser must be able to pay over time. So that's a few steps that must all fall in line for such an agreement to be an option. A second option might be when the seller wants to prevent his property from being foreclosed on. So the bank is busy foreclosing on a property, and you know, credit to the banks, they are a bit more lenient, especially with the COVID measures that they've introduced. But it may be a good idea to enter into an installment sale agreement and structure the deal in such a way that the purchaser covers the distressed seller's bond installments. So that's the first step. You know, you must keep the bondholder happy, and make sure that the bond installments are paid. A few other instances where it might be used is when there's a slowdown in sales in the property market. That's I think where we are right now. It might be a good thing when the banks have a more stricter lending criteria. At this stage, I do not know that the criteria has become any stricter after the lockdown. When it's difficult for the buyer to raise a deposit and the costs of transfer, the transfer and bond costs, and sometimes a purchaser with adverse credit records might be able to use this way to buy the property, but you must have regained the financial means to purchase the property in the meantime. My next slide will just put it into perspective. There's the National Credit Act, but what I want to tell you this morning is to don't try this at home. Don't try to do it yourself. Contact your property lawyer for advice and to draft the agreement. There's a lot of formalities prescribed in the Act. The agreement is to follow certain formalities. And for me, and I think our guys at Snyman de Jager, it's important that the purchaser and the seller understand the obligations and the rights involved in a transaction like that. So it's important that we properly advise them and that everybody understands what the potential problems can be here. Now, if we look at the National Credit Act of 2005, all credit providers should register as credit providers with the National Credit Regulator. And then if you fail to register in circumstances where credit is provided, both the capital and interest may be at risk, and the entire agreement can be found to be void. So it's important that the seller in this case, who is now the credit provider, should register with the National Credit Regulator. I had a few clients that actually managed to get that registration done. It's an administrative process. You can do it on their website, and it doesn't take that long. It took about 6 weeks, if I remember correctly, and the cost is minimal. It's like 200 or 250 rand to register. Installment sale agreements which provide for a charge or a fee or interest payable to the seller are essentially extending credit to the purchaser. So most of these agreements would provide for interest payable. Obviously, the seller gets his proceeds over time. So there's interest factor to be brought in here, and that's exactly those kind of registration that's needed with the National Credit Regulator. So that's why our advice is to get ALA agreements, get the seller to register at the National Credit Regulator. Where there's not any charges, fees, or interest payable to the seller, in those circumstances, registration would not be required. And there are also other exclusions when it comes to companies and the like, which I don't want to deal with too much now. That must be taken into account. Then lastly, I just wanted to share two brief things with you. One is an option to purchase is a good thing to use in this time where the purchaser has not seen the property and want to see the property, but he wants to have an option on a property. So the option consists of a written offer by the grantor, by the seller in any case, to sell the property on specified terms and conditions, and you will not sell the property before the end of a period. So it's a very specific agreement. Also needs to be in writing, needs to be meet all the formality requirements prescribed in the Act. So if you would like to learn more information about an option to purchase, please contact us or our offices. You might be able to see a property at a good price and then take time to arrange a finance after the lockdown ended. And then that must not be confused with the right of first refusal, which is something else. It's where the seller says to the purchaser, oh, if and when I want to sell my property, I will give you the first right to buy the property on the same terms and conditions as a third party would buy that property. So that's a bit of a different thing, also be in writing, and you can now, from a purchaser's point of view, identify the property while you're waiting for money for inheritance purposes and the like. I must say, in practice, that's one of the things that frustrates me, when somebody thinks he'll get some money from an inheritance, from an estate or somewhere, and now he buys property while not being certain when the money will become available. That creates a lot of frustration. So a right of first refusal in that circumstance might be better. That's all from me at this stage. I just want to remind you about our webinar next week, same time, same place. And Jamal in his presentation referred to the tenant-landlord relationship, which is quite an interesting relationship at this very stage. So Johan Miller, I think most of you would know him, our director at our branch in Pretoria East, will then talk to you about the lockdown and the contractual obligations of landlords and tenants. I'm certainly looking forward to that. So Clayton, yeah, I think that's from my side. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Eddie. Great presentation. Jamal, if we could just get you back online as well. Jamal? Cool. So there were just a couple of questions that came in, not too many. For those of you who still would like to post some questions, you're welcome to post them in the questions section. The one that came through was from Glynis to Blanche. This is for you, Eddie. It was based on your slide on the installment sales. And the question is just, in the case of the installment sale, when would the agents get their commission?
Yeah, thank you. That's always a good question, and I think that's where negotiation comes in. What I usually propose is that at least 50% of the commission is payable from the first installment paid, and then the balance at the later stage, maybe at when we eventually register the property. But that's negotiation. That's an agreement between the parties. So remember, the seller is selling the property. So and he's got a relationship with the agent. So that's in terms of the commission agreement with the seller.
Perfect. And then there was just a question for you, Jamal. People wanting to know whether they can contact you for coaching. Perhaps you could just share the information with them on how they would do that.
Perfect. What we'll do is whoever's asked that question, we will send them an email with coaching information and how it works, and I'll sort of direct it specific to the industry in which the person's coming from, if they'd like that. So I'm good with that. Can I ask a follow-on question to Eddie on the last question that he just answered?
Yes.
Eddie, your recommendation was that it's a negotiation between the agent and the seller with respect to when the commission would be paid. But is there sort of a guideline rule of thumb of what really works well in a scenario like that? So what is generally found to be the win-win?
Yeah. Now I'm thinking of your win-win scenario here. I think win-win is that the agent would be entitled to commission at the first installment stage. You know, the agent always feels, and I think rightly so, that he's done his work. He brought the purchaser and the seller together. He's completed his mandate. But obviously there are still risks. It might be that the purchaser not being able to fulfill his obligations in terms of the contract. You know, some of these agreements may last up to 3, 4, 5 years. And I think a fair situation should be that at least 50% of the commission is payable from the first installment. And then you can either pro rata the balance as and when the payments is made over time, or you know, take it out to the last payment when we eventually do the transfer. I think it's important to understand that transfer only takes place when the full purchase price is paid. or there's provisions that if 50% is paid, that you can then do a registration with a bond in favor of the seller. So at least when transfer happened, the full commission must have been paid.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. And then just a question from Stephen Kruger. What does FLISP stand for? FLISP?
I expected that question, so I've got it here. It's a finance-linked individual subsidy program. So it's a government program to make available these subsidies, and it's quite a big impact. If you qualify for that subsidy, it may help a lot of buyers to get into the market. And I'm pretty positive at this stage there would be a lot of properties in the area that I am familiar with in Centurion, the 1-bedroom bachelor, maybe 2-bedroom properties that might come in at around about 650 to 800, 870 price range. So I think the FLISP subsidies might become more relevant, especially with the interest rate now lower.
And is there a particular website for that, or can they contact your office or your website for information about FLISP?
Yeah, I would. I don't have the website with me right now, but I would post it on our website and get our marketers Landy and Lynn to also send it out. I think an important introduction to this is also the bond originators. I've spoken to quite a few of them, and they are usually eager to help a potential client to apply for that subsidy.
Perfect. Cool. And then just in terms of some of the other questions that have come through, a lot of people asking whether they can get access to the recording afterwards, and if they need some more information. So I think for those people who have asked those questions, at the end, we'll hand your details over to our team, to Landy from Eddie's office and Tessa from Jamal's office, and they'll correspond with you just in terms of getting out the links for the video, and answering any questions you might have about coaching, etc. And then this is an interesting question, I suppose, just in terms of the world that we're in right now with COVID-19. But the question is around electronic signatures, especially, we can't sign documents and things like that, and people being scared about, touching paper and all of that. Will electronic signatures become legal for OTPs and those type of documents?
Yeah, the Electronic Communication and Transactions Act is there, but we're not really there from deeds registration point of view. But the best advice at this stage for signing a deed of sale or any legal document is you can scan and mail obviously with the witnesses involved. Can scan and mail, but I understand that not a lot of people or all people don't have the facility to do that. But as Jamal said, in a time of this, like this, innovation becomes more relevant, and I'm expecting developments quite quickly. I can tell you that from the bank's point of view, we are doing a lot of bond registrations, and they are getting signed electronically now, but still in our office, so the client must still come in. But I'm expecting innovation very quickly after this, especially right through to the deeds office as well, because we can't sit in a situation like this again where we can't do any registrations and everything comes to a standstill. So I'm expecting development quite quickly from here on in.
Otherwise, Clayton, the agent can just meet the buyer at the cashier in Spa. And when they're taking their slip after they've processed their sale transaction, they can just quickly sign.
You said it, Jamal, not me.
No, that's just a joke.
Just as a wrap-up question, last question here from Renee van der Merwe, just asking for some clarity around the seller of an installment sale. Do they need to get registered as a credit provider, or would it only be necessary if they're receiving interest?
Yeah, I think that's the line I've tried to draw. If they receive no charge or interest, it's not required to be registered, you know, but I don't think that's a very practical arrangement. There must be some sort of interest, because the seller is now waiting for his money to be paid at a later stage, and there's an interest, you know, involved in that. You know, he doesn't have access to his money at date one, so he's losing out. So I would say, you know, if you want to enter an agreement like that, you can, and then not register with the National Credit Regulator. But I don't think it's fair towards your seller, and rather register and earn then a interest or a charge at least. So what people would sometimes do to circumvent this is to say, listen, let's work out the interest and put it on top of the purchase price. And I think that is not allowable. That is just a way to get around the registration requirement, and I wouldn't advise that at all.
Perfect. Cool. Yeah, I think that's all for today. Eddie, thank you so much for your time. Jamal, thank you for your time. All the other questions relating will be answered separately and individually. Just a reminder that our next webinar, which is with Eddie and his team on Friday the 24th, there will be information on how to register and subscribe for that webinar in the follow-up email after this, on lockdown and contractual obligations of landlords and tenants. We look forward to seeing you then. Eddie, Jamal, thank you very much.
Thank you, Clayton. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.